Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Voices of East Texas, a podcast dedicated to preserving the stories, memories, and lived experiences of small towns across East Texas. I am your host, Elena, and in this series, I'll be sitting down with members of different communities to explore how these towns have changed over time and what those changes mean to the people who call them home. Oral history is more than just remembering the past. It's about capturing the voices behind those memories. It's about the stories that don't always make it into the history books, but live on through conversation, tradition, and personal experiences. Each episode will take us to a different town, highlighting a unique character and history of East Texas through the people who know it best. For this episode, we will be visiting a family in Rusk County. Whether you're from a small town yourself or just curious about how communities change over time, I hope these conversations help you connect with the past in a meaningful way. Let's get started. So today I'm sitting down with Barbra and Danny Gage, and I love them both already. I welcomed them as they came into the UT campus library today, and they've been absolutely wonderful from the get-go. Would you like to introduce yourselves to our audience?
Hi, I'm Barbra Gage.
I'm Danny Gage.
Welcome to the podcast of the Voices of East Texas. Thank you for sitting down with us today. Where would y'all like to start? You have a fantastic story of what you've already sent me.
I'll start with the first question. Looking back over the past 70 years, what is the one moment when you realize life in the area has changed? About 2 weeks ago, we were sitting down thinking of a grocery list that we needed to do the next trip to town. And Barbara said, well, I think I'll just do an online order from Walmart. I said, well, okay, that'll be nice to try. Within an hour, it was at our door, 12 miles out of town. And I said, oh my, we have moved forward.
After we figured out how to do the whole process. That was the learning curve, was okay, do we put it in?
So 10 years ago, when there wasn't this quick, fast delivery service, what was life like?
I just remember when we were building our house, we had to go to a local lumber store, because there weren't any Lowe's. But even after that, through the years, we had to drive to Tyler, to the Lowe's over here.
And more importantly, you made a list, and you didn't go to town every day. Usually about maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, and you had to make a list to get what you needed.
So as my husband says, plan your route accordingly.
Exactly.
Which actually I think is an advantage to our age, is that we made lists. Nowadays everybody kind of does everything off the cuff, and you get to town and you just pick up what you need, but you don't plan.
Forget what you do need sometimes.
Exactly. That's so true.
You forgot the orange juice.
Exactly. The Oreos.
or the Oreos, better yet.
What is this? What is this you wrote on here that's misspelled? I can't read it.
Okay, so our next step. What does the land you live on mean to you personally? Because I know y'all live on 40 acres?
It's very important to me because it's land that I grew up on.
Wow.
We grew up on a farm. We raised cattle and we had gardens that we raised all our food on. So I've got a deep roots there, I guess you would say, and we think seriously with that too.
So how long has that plot of land been in your family?
Since 1962.
What kind of made that shift for the family to purchase that land? Because that's a pretty big purchase.
Yes, it was. It was a very big purchase for my folks because the land, it was close to his homestead too, but the property became available and they purchased it. And I asked my dad one time, I said, how did you pay for it? He said, I spent many sleepless nights trying to figure out how we were going to pay for it. And, looking at land prices now and what they bought it for, I wish we could have bought more.
$60. It was 120 acres, or right a little over 100 acres at that point. We have just part of it. But now my grandparents, my great grandparents' land grant is only a mile and a half around the corner from this property. So I actually have roots going way back in the same area.
Yeah. So when was that land grant purchased?
Oh, you had to ask. I do not know. But
That's okay.
Yeah, great grandparents, they grew cotton back then, because that was really a huge product in Rusk County, back in the early days. And so they actually, I think, gave those land grants for them to grow cotton. And so my grandmother's family had 13 children, and of course they all worked, the land, and then my great grandfather gave my great aunt and uncle 3 acres, just a plot of land on that grant, and they built their little home there. And then after that, so many of the family members, moved to Port Arthur where there was work, because after the Depression and everything, everybody needed work, and they were building refineries. And so a lot of my family moved down to that area. And then my grandparents moved back up to that little 3-acre plot of land that's on that original land grant. And so that's kind of where I spent my summers, and every vacation was, back on the actual home place. So.
And it's 3 miles from where I grew up. So we actually.
Full circle.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
We met and knew each other back then, but we didn't actually get together until after college.
I love that.
And we've been married almost 50 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. He put up with me this long.
Or did you put up with him?
Right?
No, hands down, it's him. Hands down,
So what are some of your favorite childhood memories that if you were to try to explain them to your children today, would they just go, holy cow, that's so crazy you did that?
We did a lot of child labor, I think. My sister and I laugh. My sister and I laugh about the fact that we'd go to my grandmother's in the summer, but we picked peas at 6 a.m. and we, shucked corn and canned all evening. And so, yeah, we learned to work the land and learn the value of, just providing for yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, and being
Self-reliance.
self-sustained.
Mhm.
Yes, and that's a huge skill that I think we've lost with our next generations.
Do you all have grandchildren?
Yes.
Yes.
Are those some of the things that during the summer when they have nothing to do, and are kind of free to roam, do you all do some of those things that you used to do as kids with them?
We have a small garden, and sometimes they might help if they're there, but most of the time they don't. Yeah. They're busy in
They're
the
busy.
summer, and they
Kids
live
are always
off,
busy.
so.
And I think that's part of what what I miss most is, that's what I had written down was, I miss the physical connections and the slower life pace that we had back then. I miss whenever enough being enough was, the contentment. I miss that. I miss rocking babies. I miss the fact that we've lost that physical connection with our families because, technology has changed all of that. And so going to grandma's house for the summer is not really a thing anymore because, kids are busy. They're in everything and sports and
all their activities.
Everything's just so busy. So,
But there were some really fun memories, like during harvest time, whenever we picked peas or whatever, we would sit around as a family under the oak tree outside, just shelling peas and
with our girls.
Our
girls
we
did
may
do
be,
that. Yes.
There's no telling what they may be singing or whatever. But
Yeah.
it was a
It
fun
was
time.
a really neat memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we had an exchange student when we were in, I guess in 94. She came from Switzerland
Wow.
and she just became a huge part of our family and then moved back over here and married. And so we have grandchildren from her as well. So
Oh, that's beautiful.
we tried to kind of show her what the way of life in the country, because she blew up in Zurich, and so she just kind of fell right in and wanted to learn everything. So it's really kind of a neat experience.
That is a very neat experience, something that many people don't get to experience.
Exactly.
That is very special. So tell me about the town itself. How has that kind of grown? Because you all have been there for so long, you've been able to see those changes.
What we have seen mainly from the town, used to it was small businesses, family-owned businesses, a lot of them. We've seen that decline, and now you have the Walmarts and the Walgreens and the CVS and just kind of taking over what the small businesses used to do. So that's probably one of the biggest changes.
Henderson is fortunate in the fact that back in the 90s, of course, prior to that, Highway 79 kind of was away from downtown. And so that became kind of the run, and the downtown kind of fell apart until the 90s, whenever Texas did the Texas Main Street project. And so I was able to be tourism and Main Street director during that time. And so we were really revitalizing the downtown, and I was able to help with, downtown historic lighting and historic street signs. And it was just a really neat time, but it revitalized the downtown to where people came in and reopened those old buildings, and our civic theater reopened. And it was just, I think it's maintained. It's a little hard sometimes, but it has maintained most of downtown. So, that was a huge boon to just keeping that historical, relevance to what the town used to be. So it does at least give people a chance to experience what it was in some way,
They get a little bit of that Henderson history still today.
They do.
That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Especially from an outsider. I grew up in Chicago. I moved down here maybe 6 years ago. So being able to walk the streets of downtown Henderson and kind of get a bit of that experience still is beautiful from an outsider's perspective.
I do have a funny story about when I was tourism director, though, but Henderson, the oil boom came to Kilgore and the whole big, everything. And Henderson and the Kilgore area had the opportunity to really grow and be Tyler, but the Henderson didn't want the town to lose its small town atmosphere. So they didn't want all those oil field people moving into the area. And so they all moved to Tyler. And so consequently, Tyler became the big sprawling, metropolis, and Henderson stayed a little town. So that's really was kind of an interesting way that Henderson kind of protected its own small town atmosphere.
That's an interesting twist.
Yep,
that
pretty cool.
If they had made a different decision,
exactly,
we wouldn't have the Tyler we have today.
No, it would be in Henderson.
It would be all in Henderson.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that wild?
That is very wild. That's a hard one to wrap my brain around. We're having this big, huge, brand new courthouse being built. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yes.
It could have been. You can ask questions. We've got Allison Aragon with us also today. She's helping on the sidelines. But as she's sitting here listening to our conversation, she's getting excited and wanting to ask her own questions, which is more the merrier. Let me get you your own mic so you've got one for yourself.
So my question is going back to your revamping when you're talking about the downtown part of it. There's the Heritage Syrup Festival in Henderson. How do you feel like that correlates, and how is that still keeping the vibe going on of revamping if you go to that?
It's really a great tool to not only educate the local people about the history of syrup making, the history of downtown, because originally it was just at the Depot Museum, and they have all of the historical buildings, the mill, everything is at the Depot Museum. And then we opened up the downtown during the time when I was down there and closed off the streets and all that. And so it became more of a festival, so the downtown area is the booths and festival, and then you take a hayride down to the Depot Museum, and then you see all the historical people that are there demonstrating things and showing how it was back in the old days. And so it's a huge boon to the economy and to just saving that story. It's a really neat deal. And a lot of towns, a lot of the East Texas towns festivals do that very same thing. And that was really that time of year. I mean, that time of the era was the time when all the towns in East Texas were trying to revitalize, trying to bring people back. And I mean, we've had upwards 30,000 people at the Heritage Surf Festival, in the early days. And so, it was a big deal. But Texas was focusing on festivals.
And it definitely has.
It's still a big deal.
Because there's like 1,000 people to 2,000. I mean, I know for me, I'm a vendor, and getting in there every year, if you're not in there by a certain time frame, you're not there. And it's just packed and crowded all the time.
Jason and I also tried to, my husband Jason has his own small business, and we've also tried to get into the Syrup Fest for Henderson, and we missed it by a mile, even though we were on the site to try to get our spot. So it's still very prevalent. And
but the early days were so fun because we had to not fight necessarily, but we had to convince the downtown businesses that it was a viable option. That closing the streets for 2 days or however long was, even one day, we had to just really, campaign to try to let them see what it could be. And so it was pretty cool.
So after that initial, and they got to witness the benefits of having the Syrup Festival, was it easier?
Oh, yes. After even that first year, it was remarkable. The difference that it made in the local businesses. We had to adjust a lot of things because of visuals and things, to make them still feel special. Yeah. But because, after all, they were our main, money makers in town for the whole year. But it was a really good partnership. I
feel very honored to meet somebody that kind of kickstarted that.
Yes.
Very much so. A huge team to do it, but we enjoyed doing it. Yeah, it was quite fun.
That's amazing. Speaking of that fun free time, how did you spend?
Each day started, my brother and I were responsible for milking the cow. So one of us would milk in the morning, the other would milk in the afternoon, then we'd go to school. We would come home and we'd have to feed the stock, feed the animals, take care of the garden, whatever needed to be done there. And then if we were finished, we could roam the woods. We would go just running through the woods, just having fun.
3
as
and 4
kids.
miles away.
Well,
that is a huge difference. And back then,
be home for dinner.
Right. I mean, they could, and some people, if they live in the country, can still somewhat do that. But nowadays, you just don't. Most people in the cities or even areas, won't let their kids even be out in the front yard without keeping an eye on them at all times, And so back then I remember walking from my grandmother's house. I was probably 2 to 3 miles down to the lake and by myself. And, she let me go.
It was a different time.
It was.
It was
really,
for sure.
My brother, during the summer, my brother and I would occasionally get on our bikes. We would ride 5 miles to Minden, pick up Coke bottles on the way, turn in our Coke bottles for the deposit, and get us a drink, and then come home.
And the cost of that, can you just imagine?
We got into, when we were looking at the gas prices the other day, we got into a discussion about the lowest price we could remember. So what'd you say,
17 cents a gallon.
Get out of town.
I actually drove away from a pump one time because it was 33 cents a gallon and it was cheaper down the street.
28 cents is what I remember now. I was part of the whole gas wars in the 70s because my sister and I were trying to get to Texas Tech and couldn't. You had to sit in line forever. And we had 13 hours to go from Port Arthur all the way to Lubbock. And so we had to really be strategic about how we filled up our car. Yeah, it was quite a strange time. Yeah, those whole gas wars.
It's crazy as I say that, and I had that conversation with my dad just recently, and I remember gas prices being $1.77, and I was like, no, I think we have a photo of us in a gas station, and we do, and it was on a traveling trip because then you traveled by car for everything. You really didn't. You did road trips that way. And we have one where the gas is $1.02. And it was like, when? And I was like, I'm only 36 years old. Like, come on now. It can't have changed that fast.
That's another thing too, because Danny and I married in 1978. And so in 1980, we built a home. And so that was the Jimmy Carter years, And so we went and we borrowed $35,000, only enough to pay for the materials. And so anyway, we locked our loan in August at 13.9%. And then in September, interest rates went to 21%. And we had 2 car loans that were both 14%. So, I mean, if you really, and back then, it was just how everything was. You didn't think about how outrageous that was. But these days, if you thought of going in and getting a loan for 14% interest, you would be mortified. But back then, it was just, if you were going to have anything, you had to do it.
Times have certainly changed.
And honestly, the best part I think one of the best things about change was power tools. We built our house with a hammer and a table saw and an electric skill saw. And we hammered everything. And so nowadays, it's a no-brainer. We love power tools.
That's a good one. How's the population changed? Because,
well, I looked that up whenever I looked at your question. And Henderson went from 6,900 to 96 in a strange time. And I tried to figure out what actually was going on during that time, because it was before Texas Utilities came in. And Texas Utilities was one of the big things, because Henderson had the brick plant, and lumber mill, sawmill was pretty much the industry around, unless you worked in the oil field. And the oil field could have been a lot of that 69 to 97. It was like, that's a pretty good jump. It was 41% jump.
Yeah, that's a big jump.
Population.
Yes.
So, it could very well have been that at the time the brick plant was expanding. And so that could have been a big part of it. But when Texas Utilities came in the 70s, middle 70s, that provided a lot of jobs. A lot of families moved in there. Housing changed. That's one of your questions, was the housing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Subdivisions went up because people that worked out there needed housing. And there were a lot of support industries that were coming into that too. That were feeding into that Texas Utilities thing. So, that was a huge turning point in Rusk County whenever the power plant went in. And Danny went to work there mainly because the building industry just completely fell out, with 14% interest, of course. And so he went to work for Texas Utilities. I remember it was like $6 an hour, wasn't it?
Something like that.
That was in 1981 or 2, I think. 79. And boy, we thought we were rich, because the housing industry had been so slow. And then 20 years later, they built a gas-powered plant fairly close to where we are. And so he was able to transition over to that plant for the rest of his career. So, yeah, it's been power companies have been a blessing.
In the early years, neighbors were neighbors, and now you're lucky to know your neighbor.
That's a fact.
Well, and I think, small towns are a strange dynamic in some respects. A lot of small towns, and actually I've even heard that about Tyler, very difficult to break into the old guard, into the original family structure that was there a long time ago. And that really forced the Rusk County area to open their eyes and try to trust a little more. And that's a hard place, And so I think we did good. The churches made a huge difference in that, because people were coming in and joining churches, and people were, they just became more open to learning about other people that have moved in, and welcoming, and I guess the church really had to have been the strong suit in that whole population growth.
I've heard that. Definitely. The church kind of opens a different sort of door of welcoming.
Right.
To build that community.
Well, and used to, one of the sayings was, if you're going to find a job, go join a church, because then you meet the community leaders that already belong to that church, that own all those companies, that you can, and actually that should still hold true today, probably not as much as it used to back then, but that was your avenue to finding a good job. And so you go join a church, and then you become part of a community that worships together. And so, yeah, it strengthens your whole everything.
That's the Bible Belt working in action.
Exactly.
For sure.
Exactly.
That's not something I've ever experienced, but that's amazing. And that's such like a beautiful way of building community and your lives. So we're going to kind of circle back.
Okay.
How has technology changed your lives? Because you all have had such a great, long, wonderful, beautiful life here in East Texas, where there was hardly any technology, to now you can order groceries
Scan and go
from
Walmart.
Power tools.
Yes,
Right to your door.
Well, we went from radio to having the first black and white TV to, I remember growing up, now I grew up in Port Arthur, but I remember growing up and having the very first color television on our block. And of course the screen was green, but it was color. It wasn't black and white. And then Danny and I had one of the first microwaves. It was huge, huge. And then we had one of the first VCRs. And then we had one of those camera things that looked like the television crews, because it was so
you put on your shoulder.
So you had those big 8-track, whatever things, cassette tapes, and I was telling my grandson yesterday, I said, we were talking about this podcast and how you were going to put it on a flash drive or whatever. And I said, honestly, I'm really wondering now if that's going to be viable, because we thought cassette tapes were going to stay forever. And then we took all those 8-track things of our kids, and I don't know nowadays, and CDs are gone. My computer doesn't even have a CD. Yeah, I think it's still.
Now you throw it in the cloud, and then it's like,
exactly.
What's this cloud?
Where is that?
That's not very. That's kind of nefarious sounding, isn't it? So honestly, I wonder, how are we going to preserve in a way that our kids could even listen to, our great grandchildren could even listen to this?
Yeah, is Spotify
What's
going to be
happening?
around?
Is Spotify
then?
going to be around?
Exactly.
Is
And you know, that's a viable answer. I mean,
Mhm.
question, because when you think about it, what we always thought had longevity is nothing.
yes,
now.
yeah.
I mean, it's so archaic. It's almost a sci-fi movie. From,
Yes,
you know,
yeah.
Lost
I had
in
a
Space.
teenager ask me, I'm gonna go buy these cassettes at Half Price Books, and I said, let's see how this works out for you, because I haven't owned a cassette player
I got
in 20 years. So let's see how this works out. And he quickly had to realize that we don't have something that would be able to play it. So he went and bought himself for Christmas a record player so that he could listen to records, because like you said, these things, they quote unquote age out, and then we're on to the very new next thing. Thumb drives, which is the same as a USB or an
When
external
you stop and
hard.
think about the fact that we've spent 70 years to get to where we are today. But if you look at the change, it was drastic to get to where we are today. And if that holds and you move forward another 70 years, how drastic a change is that going to be? Because this was pretty drastic. And so
I'm going to finally have my Rosie from the Jetsons.
That's just thinking of the Jetsons. I want the car.
I want Rosie.
We have kids in Arkansas, and I thought, boy, it'd be nice if you could just zip over there in 5 minutes instead of 4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah.
So I kind of got a question on that. Do you have any of these? Do you still have like maybe your VCR, or do you have the camera still, so that way you can show
No,
We
the
had some,
grandkids?
we had some tapes in the storage building, but we don't have a way to play.
they actually disintegrate over the years.
Yeah.
You can't use them.
Oh,
We do have our 8mm
Wedding
reel from our wedding that
It's
is
probably not even
useless
any good
because,
now.
yeah, I don't know. I guess you'd have to take it to one of those people that might have an 8mm projector to show it, but it would be kind of funny.
I bet you we have one downstairs.
Wow.
We have an archive in this building downstairs. And I would not be surprised if the ladies down there in our archive at UT have an 8mm projector.
Well,
They love to collect things from all over East
Oh, wow.
Texas. And so I would not. They're open to the public. So I would not,
yeah.
I would be like,
what is it like though, talking to your grandkids about these things and explaining how it is? What is their like reaction to you guys?
Mhm.
Do they look at you like that didn't happen?
I think we've built an appreciation into our girls of heritage things. We are fortunate to still have a family reunion every year, and so they've grown up seeing the older and the oldest generation of family members, and so both of our girls really have an appreciation for our history.
So if your great grandchildren were to list, or great great grandchildren, let's jump it like another 70 years. If they were to listen to this episode of this podcast, what are some things that you would like them to remember about this time? Or life here in East Texas? What is it like for you? What's that message for them?
Try to keep life simple. Try not to be always striving for more, but learn to be content with.
Slow down. Don't be just running all the time. Slow down. Enjoy the present. Enjoy what's around you. Enjoy your
Value
family.
the people you love, because they could be gone tomorrow and you will wish you had stopped to listen a little more, a little longer. I think that our world has gotten so fast and so, we settle for FaceTime instead of connections, which honestly is a huge blessing and a curse at the same time, because I remember when my sister's family moved to England in the 80s and they were there for 3 years. The only way you could talk to them is long distance, and it was very expensive. And so it was almost like the World War II thing, where you only had to wait on a letter, or back then we could do videos and send them. But, nowadays everything is just so easy. You don't appreciate, and we used to appreciate how wonderful that was when that letter got there, because you hadn't spoken to them or seen them in, a month or two, and you finally got a letter. And yeah, I think that's one thing. Technology has really changed relationships, and that hands-on connectivity that we used to have with our families, and now.
Kids interesting. Well, thank you both for sitting down with us today. Thank you for sharing your voices and your story. It is absolutely stunning and beautiful.
Well, thank you.
We
It's
enjoyed
been
it.
fun.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of The Voices of East Texas. Stories like these remind us that history isn't just something we read. It is something we live, remember, and pass down. The voices we heard today are part of a larger story, one that continues to shape our communities in ways both big and small. I want to give a special thank you to today's guests, Barbra and Danny Gage from Henderson, Texas, for sharing their stories and memories. I'd also like to thank Alice and Aragon for helping with production today, and to all of you for listening and taking the time out of your day to hear the Gage's family story. As this series continues, we will visit more towns across East Texas, gathering the memories and the experiences that make each place unique. If this episode resonated with you, or if you have a story of your own to share, I'd love to hear from you. These conversations are only possible because of people like you willing to lend their voices. Until next time, I'm Elena. Thank you for listening.